You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. We cannot deny the waves of controversy surrounding R. Kelly's legal battles. But what we also cannot ignore, or what deserves to be heard in equal measure, is the immense drama, confusion, and legal inconsistencies that have followed him from trial to appeal. The drama peaked once again at the New York appeal hearing, where sharp eyes and listening ears watched closely as the state attorney struggled and fumbled, even to justify and defend the rulings handed down by the Honorable Judge Ann Donnelly at the Brooklyn Federal Court. The very same court, the same courtroom, and notably the same judge who, alongside a jury of 12, played a central role in what many now recognize as a deeply flawed trial. But let's slow this down and go step by step. We're not here to inflame. We're here to lay out what happened. To speak truthfully about a legal process that to many felt rushed, prejudiced, and unjust. Because when a man's freedom is at stake, when his name and life hang in the balance, truth should be the only language spoken in the courtroom. As the appeal hearing unfolded, the cracks in the prosecution's case began to widen. In fact, the state attorney's presentation lacked clarity, lacked conviction, and most importantly lacked legal integrity when it came to explaining and defending the decisions made at trial. Decisions that did not arise in a vacuum. Decisions that impacted R. Kelly's life forever. This was a trial that should have been the epitome of objectivity, fairness, and truth-seeking. Instead, it turned into what many now believe was a courtroom drama with a predetermined conclusion shaped not by the facts, but by the atmosphere of hostility that surrounded the entire process. It began with the selection of the jury. 12 individuals handpicked to represent the conscience of the court. But how impartial were they really? We now know that several jurors seated during the R. Kelly trial were not just casually familiar with the case. They were loyal followers of the controversial docuseries Surviving R. Kelly. A series not created for the courtroom but for television. A production whose aim was to present a singular and often exaggerated narrative designed for shock value and emotional reaction. The jurors had already consumed a version of the story far removed from the courtroom facts. That alone raises the most urgent question: was R. Kelly ever truly given a fair trial? How do you allow individuals to sit in judgment when they've already been fed an emotionally charged portrayal of the accused? How do you maintain the foundational legal principle of presumption of innocence in a courtroom where the jury has been tainted by storytelling, dramatization, and innuendo? These are not minor missteps. These are gaping holes in the foundation of a just trial. Holes that attorney Jennifer Bonjean is now battling to expose and correct through the appeal process. Now let's dig deeper into the actual charges. The government brought a sweeping list of allegations against R. Kelly. Charges that carried devastating weight: RICO violations, Mann Act violations, and even forced labor. The severity of these accusations shocked the public. But what the public wasn't told, what the headlines didn't highlight, is that most of these charges, when stripped of emotion and examined with legal precision, were not proven. The RICO charge, for example, which was the centerpiece of the government's case, was meant to paint R. Kelly as the mastermind of an organized criminal enterprise. This is the same statute that is used to dismantle mafia families, drug cartels, and criminal syndicates, and yet here it was being used against a single R&B artist. The Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, created to bring down criminal empires, was invoked against a singer. A man who, by all available evidence, did not run a gang, did not operate an organized crime family, and did not command a criminal enterprise. Where was the structure? Where was the hierarchy? Where were the clearly coordinated criminal activities carried out by his associates? The government's case was so loose and so poorly constructed that it felt like they were trying to force a round peg into a square hole. And what about the Mann Act? A century-old law originally passed to prevent the exploitation of women, was weaponized in this case in the most questionable ways. The Mann Act is a law that addresses the transportation of individuals across state lines for illicit purposes. But what the court conveniently overlooked is that consensual relationships, even if controversial in the court of public opinion, do not equate to criminal conduct under the Mann Act. To prove a violation of this law, there must be clear evidence of coercion, lack of consent, or illegal intent in the interstate commerce. And yet in many instances none of those elements were convincingly presented. And the most emotionally charged of all, the forced labor charges. Accusations that suggested R. Kelly compelled individuals to work against their will under threat or coercion. But as with the other charges, when you strip away the emotional undertones and look at the actual facts, the legal foundation simply wasn't there. There were no contracts, no threats, no surveillance footage, and no financial exploitation that fits the textbook definition of forced labor. All we saw was a prosecution shockingly attempting to present relationship events as labor. R. Kelly's defense attorney Jennifer Bonjean has took all of this to the appeal court with conviction and clarity. And as the appeal deliberations proceed, more and more observers are waking up to the realization that this trial may have had more to do with emotion and public outrage than it did with objective law. In the eyes of the law, emotion cannot be the scale by which guilt is measured. Evidence must lead, facts must guide, and verdicts must be free of prejudice. What happened in that Brooklyn courtroom appears to many to be the very opposite. The prosecution's case was very shaky, but the jury's impartiality was compromised. And the charges themselves, especially the RICO, the Mann Act, and the forced labor allegations, were either legally unfounded or grossly misapplied. R. Kelly may be a controversial figure. But controversy does not strip a person of their legal rights. He, like any other citizen, deserves a trial that upholds the Constitution and not one that bends to the pressures of public perception or narrative. As the appeal process unfolded, however, it became increasingly evident that Jennifer Bonjean is doing more than just defending a client. She's defending the very principle of justice. She is fighting against a legal process that many now believe was tainted from the start. She is asking the courts to look again, to re-examine the facts, and to ask the hard questions. And most importantly, to uphold the standard that every person in America, regardless of fame, infamy, or history, is entitled to a fair trial. If you want to be featured in our video releases, send us your clips by emailing them to hnnewsroom242@gmail.com or use Google Drive for larger files. Be sure to include your name and any details you'd like us to know. We can't wait to showcase your contributions. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say. To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.